We're here in Valencia, Spain, and we're exploring the old town of Valencia, which has about 2,000 years of history. And this area is home to some of Europe's most iconic tourism landmarks. So we're out in front of the central market. This is one of the most popular markets in Valencia. It's one of 4 or 5 large markets like this, and it's a popular tourist attraction. We're in front of the Silk Exchange, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and is actually one of the most important Gothic monuments in Europe. So once you've seen some of the iconic heritage landmarks that are here in Valencia, you should take an opportunity to turn down one of the many heavily graffitied alleys and side streets that are in Valencia. And at almost every turn, you're going to come across something else Valencia is famous for, which is its street art. And this video is going to explore some of the street art and artists that make up this really big tourism attraction. Hi everyone, welcome to Street Art in Valencia, Spain. I'm Professor Alan Rice, and this is TMD at OC. Street art is really interesting because it exists on this continuum between, graffiti, which is, illegal and considered a form of vandalism, and at the other end of that continuum would be a public art installation, which definitely isn't illegal. It's planned, it's part of a community public art program, and street art's sort of in the middle. It occupies sort of a really interesting space. Have this sort of tension between being legitimate and being vandalism. A building owner might say it's vandalism if they've just had somebody come and paint a cartoon figure on the side of their building or a security gate. But a person like you or me wandering around in the old town and appreciating all the different street art might say no. I think also it depends a bit potentially on who the artist is. So, maybe a famous artist like Banksy or Esquif might actually even add value by putting a street art installation on your building. And maybe it depends a bit on the message. Street art often has a social or political message that goes along with it, and there's plenty of examples in the old town of that. Actually, street art and graffiti have more in common than they don't. They occupy the same spaces, usually in alleyways or laneways. They use the same mediums like spray paint or roll-on house paint. They both have this sort of feeling or sense of vandalism or sort of a tension behind them. And they range significantly in levels of sophistication. So graffiti can range from a simple tag to bubble art that we're all familiar with, but there's also really, sophisticated installations of graffiti. And street art's the same. It can range from, stickers to, fine art, cartoonish, or, any number of different kinds of styles. The key difference is in the intended audience. Graffiti, its audience is other graffiti artists, and the symbolism that it uses is really only understood by the groups of graffiti people. So, the public doesn't really have access to really understanding what a graffiti piece is all about. Street art, on the other hand, uses symbolism and figures that, we're all familiar with and that we can interpret. So, street art uses things that are accessible to the general public.
In order to understand how street art works with tourism, we need to look at how it fits in with the tourism system. Remember in the tourism system that we have the originating region, the transit region, the destination, and the environment. When we consider what motivates people to travel or become tourists, we think about what happens in the originating region that causes them to want to travel in the first place. This can be things like bad weather in Canada when it's winter and a desire to go somewhere sunny. It can be a desire to have a change in our normal routine and any number of things that push us to want to travel. When we think about the destination, on the other hand, we think about things that pull us to the destination. These can be things like natural beauty of the destination, wonderful beaches, but in a lot of cases it's cultural and heritage attractions that make up one of the key things that drive people to go to a place. That was the case for us when we decided to go to Valencia. It has wonderful natural environmental characteristics like beautiful beaches and whatnot, but the idea of going to see and experience street art in that location was one of our key drivers. So that was a big pull factor for us to want to go to Valencia. So I think about that in the context of the system. In order for something to be part of the system, it has to have some role. And in our case, the role of street art was to cause us to want to go there. That makes street art a tourism attraction. Attraction is one of the key things that are pull factors for a destination. Attractions come in many forms. These can be heritage buildings, of which there are many in Valencia. It can be amusement parks, also aquariums, theaters, those kinds of things. But art galleries, public art installations, and I believe in our case, street art is one of those attractions. The street art in Valencia that we saw is in a fairly contained area, which makes it fairly easy to package as a tourism product. And now back to Valencia.
There are a lot of businesses that pop up around street art as a product. So, for example, here in Valencia, in our travels around Old Town, we've seen, bicycle tours, walking tours, self-guided tours. Once we start packaging street art as a destination tourism product, then it becomes part of the system. The key thing, though, is that street art is really becoming much more accepted around the world. And, as we travel around, we'll see examples of street art in most of the cities that we visit. Street art can be like a really important cultural asset because it can help form part of a community's identity. And tourists are increasingly seeking to experience local identity and culture as part of their tourism experiences. So street art can play an important role in that. Tourism can really be, a positive part of community strategies. So using tourism to communicate identity are some of the key elements that tie street art and tourism together. It can also help achieve the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Of course, the United Nations has 17 different Sustainable Development Goals. Street art, because it often has a social, political message, could really actually touch on any one of the 17 goals. Several European communities like Valencia, where we are, or even Barcelona and Lisbon in Portugal in particular, have used street art as a way to help revitalize marginalized communities through building that sense of cultural identity. One of the goals talks about poverty reduction and community development. So we've talked about how street art can be part of revitalizing marginalized communities by bringing tourism dollars into those communities. And the experience-based nature of tourism lends itself really well to using street art as a vehicle to communicate local identity. It also has the ability to talk about issues related to social change, climate change, and a range of other things. And the neat thing about street art is that it can be a really engaging way to communicate that message. More so than having climate scientists raise warnings about climate change. Street art, is something that you can experience through discovery, and most of the street art is going to have some messaging about elements that are of concern to local communities. We engage with street art, and it's a way of sort of putting us off center, and a way of communicating that message that may be unexpected, and that may be more effective at creating ideological change and creating activism around those 17 goals than more traditional means of communication. There have been many case studies where street art's been effective in revitalization, and there's been other case studies that show how effective it is at communicating message. Because it combines art and the message, it talks to us in different ways than we're used to. And that may cause higher levels of engagement in causes. So this is Plaza del Tossal, and this was once one of the most famously photographed spaces in all of Valencia. But this plaza is home to two of the most iconic murals in all of Valencia. Moses with a Beard of Snakes by the artist Blue, and Tumbling Cars by Esquif. At least partially, these two murals were responsible for changing Tossal Square from a rundown industrial place to one where people wanted to visit, which prompted the cafes to show up and make it a hip place to hang out. However, it may have been a victim of their own success, because now the space that held the murals has been developed with an apartment building and retail space. However, Tossal Square is still a great starting point to begin exploring the old town for its street art murals. The Valencia street art scene is home to quite a number of different artists. One of the challenges is, though, that a lot of the street artworks aren't signed, so they're anonymous. I mean, given the idea that it's vandalism and it's illegal, it may not be the brightest idea for you to throw your name on something that might get you in trouble. But, there are a number of street art pieces that are signed. Disney Lexia is one of my favorites, and he signs his work. And you'll see quite a number of examples of him around the city. So Disney Lexia is a Venezuelan-born street artist who grew up in Southern California. He combines indigenous motifs with ancient mythologies to create these kinds of street arts. But he's also a very successful commercial artist. He's worked with brewing companies, he's done work with a car company, Audi, as well as being a successful t-shirt designer. And just a great example of street art that you'll find just wandering around in the old town in Valencia. Public art is planned usually by a municipality, and they are meant to be sort of permanent installations. Street art, on the other hand, is not part of a public art plan, generally speaking. It's temporary in nature, and it sort of pops up. I wouldn't say at random, but it just sort of appears in one place, and it's got this kind of here at one time and gone at another time. It can be painted over by building owners, or it can be graffitied over by other graffiti artists, or it could just succumb to the elements. Jay Warks, who creates murals of animals and has some kind of political saying with them. That's interesting because, there are a lot of different types of street art. And I mentioned that they range in sophistication. So, at kind of one end, you've got stencil art, where artists will take a cardboard stencil and spray paint the stencil, and that's sort of it. Or they may create stickers and put them all around town. That's called sticker bombing. So that's a fairly quick and easy way to make these street art installations. But another prominent artist is MRBT62, who is a sticker bomber and a stencil artist. And like literally anywhere you go in all of Valencia, you will come across the photographer, which is his character, which really is, I think, a self-portrait of himself. David de Lemon, for example, is a pretty prolific street artist here. He has a character called Graffiti Ninja, as well as some other figures that are not quite stencil, but in that sort of genre. A lot of the street art that we've seen has been, portrait style, where it's a figure, a person, or an animal even. But there's also fantasy types of paintings and murals. There's a crew that includes a number of artists. The crew's called XLF, and one of my favorite artists from that group is called Dai. And Dai is famous for creating fantasy murals that often include a character with a space helmet on. So they're quite prominent around. Chicotin is another who is famous for having murals of things with multiple sets of eyes. It can be a little disconcerting to look at, but it's definitely interesting. As well as what you might consider like a fine art things, as well as abstract. So it really goes from one end of the spectrum to the other in terms of types, right? There are almost as many types of street art as there are street artists. It's that sense of discovery and, the unexpected, what's going to be around the next corner kind of feeling that's really engaged us in the street art experience here. So my recommendation would be to maybe go to Plaza del Tassel as a starting point and just wander, and you will not be disappointed by any of the turns that you take. You'll always find something interesting to see. Come to Valencia and make a point of coming to Old Town and seeing all of the street art you can.